Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. Our program today features an interview with a garden author and a preview of the upcoming Champlain Valley Fair. But we begin with a story on fencing. Fencing is one of the oldest sports in existence, and as we learn in this report from Keith Silva, fencing is also a successful club sport at the University of Vermont.
Could you say and spell your name, please?
Sylvia Sword, S-W-O-R-D.
You're kidding, right?
No, that's actually my name.
Sylvia Sword, not to put too fine a point on it, is a member of the University of Vermont's Fencing Club. Open to all UVM students, fencing is designated as a club sport at UVM and receives its funding from the Student Government Association. The club competes in regional and national tournaments. The roots of fencing stretch back into antiquity, the Renaissance, and 18th century France. While fencing is one of the 4 sports that have been featured in every modern Olympics, it has long been eclipsed by the matinee idols of yesterday and today. But what gets projected on the big screen isn't fencing. That's playing with swords.
It's not like what you see in the movies. I've studied some stage fighting, and it's like in the name. It's staged, and you work it out with your opponent in the scene, and none of it is natural. It looks organic when they do it on stage, but fencing is the real organic sword fighting.
You need to push me back.
The heart and soul of the UVM Fencing Club is found in Megan Lynn and Keegan Harris. Each is an accomplished fencer, quick to share their passion and sharp when it comes to the artistry and strategy of the sport they love.
There are 2 major schools of thought in fencing. One is that victory is excellence, and then the other is that excellence is victory. And I'm of the latter school. So I lose a lot, but for me that is the secondary purpose. It's more about sort of an introspective thing. It's a very philosophical pursuit, and that often gets overlooked, but that's what I'm all about.
I'm a very passive person, so it's kind of funny whenever I tell my friends that I'm a fencer, they're like, really? Because they have that vision of kind of the sword fighting and the bashing of swords, and so me being more of a calm, quiet person and seeing this more aggressive side to me and competitive spirit is interesting. I think that I'm kind of a technical person. I like that really technical aspect of the sport where you have to work on these little things in order to see improvement, right down to the footwork and the way you hold your hand and everything. So it's very technical, as I said.
Fencing is as much about footwork as it is about any other physical aspect of the sport. Being successful as a fencer means being good on one's feet.
The very first step is footwork. You have to learn the on-guard position and then an advance and a retreat and just really simple footwork. And it's just focusing on refining that until it's perfect, because that is the foundation of the entire sport, the movement, because you need to be able to move towards someone to attack someone and move away to get out of someone's attack, reach out of someone's reach. That is the first thing that you teach, and then after that, it's letting people know that you're not just using that brute force to attack someone. It's more refined, and you need kind of a finesse and a grace to it in order to successfully pull off an attack.
What we try to do at the club generally when we're bringing people up is to really reinforce that foundation so that when people do non-standard things, they do it by choice rather than by accident, because that's how you get better on the strip, is when you're doing something that startles your opponent, not that your opponent can take advantage of.
Yeah, my first tournament, I still remember being so nervous and just
Trying to explain the rules, nuances, and subtleties of any sport to the uninitiated is tricky, and fencing is no exception to the rule.
I think what surprises people most when I tell them about fencing is telling them about the rules, because there are a lot of rules in foil, not as many in épée, which is great, but I think people don't think about that when you see two people hacking away at each other with swords. You don't think about the rules of the game.
Bouts are held on what fencers refer to as the strip. There are 3 different weapons in fencing: épée, foil, and saber. The weapons are wired as well as the jackets, and the scoring is decided by both man and machine.
The electronic component of it is there to aid referees, and this has been a big problem since, before there was electricity. It was a big problem because sometimes people would lie and say, no, I didn't get hit. So electric equipment makes it a lot easier for a referee to see, yes, indeed, someone got hit, yes, indeed, someone didn't.
When one fencer touches their opponent, a signal is sent to what's called the jury box. It's then up to the referee to make the final call and score the point. The first to 5 points wins the bout. In competitions, scores from individual bouts are tallied towards an overall team score. Call it a one for all for one kind of a thing.
You can improve yourself and push yourself as hard as you want to and do as well as you want to. You put the commitment and the time in, but at the same time you also have that team atmosphere, and you have your team cheering you on during bouts, and we do cheers and we're all really excited for each other. So it's individual and you have that team aspect at the same time, which is what I really love about it.
Style and beauty are present in all sports, from the arc of a ball to the movement of the human body itself. The poetry of fencing is found in its grace and its elegant violence.
It really is beautiful to watch, that technicality of it and the grace, and it is sometimes likened to ballet and dance. So it's really wonderful to watch the movement.
I'm an especially acrobatic fencer, although I'm ashamed to say that's because I'm not very good at the distance game. What happens is I get way too close, and because I've spent years getting way too close, I've learned ways of working with it. But I think the picture of a really good fencer is someone who never, there's sort of this poise and this sense of remove, as though they weren't even thinking about anything, and their hands and their legs just put them where they need to be in these subtle motions. That's beautiful. That's what I wish I could do.
You make up your own style, I guess, and I love the grace of it. Personally, that's always been more of my thing, not so much that I'm gonna cut you in half, but more like I'm gonna cut you in half in a way that's really beautiful and graceful,
What else is there to say to sword's point, other than touche? At the University of Vermont, I'm Keith Silva with Across the Fence.
Thank you, Keith. Our next segment involves a well-known garden author. Stephanie Cohen is known as the Perennial Diva. She's been with us before to talk about her books on perennial garden design. Recently, UVM Extension horticulturalist Leonard Perry sat down with Cohen to discuss her latest book. Here's Leonard.
If you're a gardener, one of the problems you may have is trying to figure out how to get color and blooms and interest right through the season. Well, we've got a book for you today. It's called The Nonstop Garden, and it's written by Stephanie Cohen and Jennifer Benner. And we're actually very fortunate to have one of the authors, Stephanie Cohen, with us today. Thanks, Stephanie, for some time to tell us about this book, The Nonstop Garden. How do you get a garden that doesn't stop?
Well, you plant carefully. We wanted people to appreciate their garden from spring to fall, and then plant things for winter interest. The first book I wrote was on perennial gardening. It just basically was perennials. But now we've added shrubs, trees. If you feel like putting a pot in the garden, a container, put it in there. What we're saying is, as long as they play nice together, that's fine. In other words, you have to, sun plants go as sunshade plants, wet, dry. But if you're putting them with the same cultural requirements, there's no reason. Why does a beautiful herb have to sit in an herb garden where nobody sees it? Why can't it play with the big boys? So that was the whole idea of this thing, because most of the people, a lot of people today have very small gardens. They live in townhouses, or they have an acre. And then they look at books and they see these estates, they're like 20, 30 acres. And then they say, well, this is the cutting garden, and this is the herb garden, and that's the shrub border. Well, we can't do that over here. It's the garden.
we may not have the time to do that if we had the space. So can do a small space, and
you have to have the inclination or 3 gardeners.
Yeah.
And when you look at the cover there, you see that there's perennials, there's a tree in the background, several trees in fact, and then there's shrubs all mixed with the perennials. And that's what we're really aiming for. And for winter interest, we want you to pick things like that have interesting bark or interesting shapes, so that you're basically building into it structure for the winter. I don't use the term winter gardening, because winter gardening means to me sitting at my picture window, drinking a hot chocolate, looking out at the snow. Winter gardening means to me that I've planted it properly, and I'm looking out and I'm seeing color and form and texture from the bark, and there's things out there to look at. Of course, you need some conifers out there at that point of the year. So it's just sort of mixing and matching.
I think that's a good point, because so many people think, oh, this should be the perennials, these should be the annuals, and these should be the shrubs. Well, there's no reason you shouldn't mix them up, and also thinking about more than just, as we see on the cover, more than just the colored flowers, but the texture, the forms with upright and big leaves and spikiness, and you've got design examples in here, you've got plant examples, you've got just a lot, I think that's,
we tried to cover
ideas.
the basis. There's trees, there's shrubs, there's annuals. There's a part of when we get to August, and that we call that the dog days. And if you don't have any, yes, there are some perennials and some shrubs that bloom in August, but not an overabundance. So that's when the annuals come in. And so if you don't plant them, you don't have that color when you want it. And so that's why I say you have to include everybody.
And that's a good point, because often that's a question I get. How do I get color into the summer? Everything's gone by, there we have it.
Because I tell people, you know, if you don't plant and then you look at your garden, you want to step on it because it's so terrible looking. And we don't want you to do that at all. We want you to appreciate it from spring through winter.
Well, thank you so much, Stephanie, for spending some time sharing this book with us, and hope you'll look for it in either online or in your local bookstore. For University of Vermont Extension, I'm Leonard Perry.
Our thanks to Leonard and Stephanie Cohen. Next month, Leonard will feature another of Cohen's books. It's called Fallscaping. Now, the Champlain Valley Fair opens on Saturday, and we want to leave you this afternoon and offer the sights and sounds from the Midway at last year's fair. Thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. I'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.
1, 2, 3, 4. For a video copy of today's program, call toll-free 1-888-ATF-3430. Across the Fence is brought to you as a public service by University of Vermont Extension and WCAX-TV.